Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for this Athlete Mental Health Week. It's been an incredible week here, hosted by Athletes for Hope, Polinsky's Hope, um, Sarah Schultz Foundation, and it's been just and Kevin Love Fund. It's been a wonderful week of conversation, of panels about just mental health in all aspects, if of performance in the community, and just sort of how we can all come together and really reinforce that. So my name is Mena Mirhom. I'm the Chief Wellbeing Officer for Athletes for Hope, and I am delighted I get to host this star-studded panel that we have this afternoon together to be able to talk about the idea of game changers, how sports can be this unifying factor, how it can be a force for good, how it can be building bridges, breaking down barriers, really just transformational in every way. And there's no better week to talk about that than the big game. I know Representative Harris excited about the birds for sure. We're gonna get more into that. You're welcome for bringing you Saquon. That was our gift to Philadelphia. So I'm just going to take a second to introduce our incredible panelists and just also give them the floor to share a bit more about themselves. I want to start with Dr. Derek Sweet, who is the founder of Full Circle Confidential, a legendary sports psychiatrist who has been a pioneer for decades, a consultant for the NBA, the NFL, the NHL, just someone who's a wonderful mentor and friend. So I'm excited to have you, Dr. Sweet, if you can say hello to the folks as well for a moment.
Thanks, Mina. It's just my pleasure to be here. And I don't know, I've never been described as legendary before, so you clearly are a friend. Thank you. But yeah, it's great to be here. My work is in sports psychiatry, and I'm looking forward to participating in this panel and seeing what wisdom we can all share and learn from each other.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much, Derek. And then we have, as we mentioned, the person who's most excited this week for his team in the big game, Representative Jordan Harris, just an inspiring force for good, just for community, for change. We met actually in the news cycle, and I got to see him live, be able to do his, his prolific sort of inspiring way of speaking about how you can get into community change. So not just in the Pennsylvania Assembly where he is, but just really around the country and in many communities. And I also saw a clip, Representative Harris, this morning where you were speaking in a prayer, and that was also very powerful. I was just really moved by the way that you were invoking the work of the divine in the word that we're in the way that we're doing community work as well. So just thank you for being here and thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much. First and foremost, go birds. Uh,
That's a must.
and I will thank you for Saquon Barkley. We definitely appreciate you to all of my friends in New York. We appreciate that gift. But no, seriously, I am blessed and privileged and honored to be here with you. I am a member of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives. I serve my neighbors in South and Southwest Philadelphia in the Pennsylvania General Assembly, and I serve the entire state as the Majority Appropriations Chairman in the House, where my committee does all of the work focusing on the budget for the state of Pennsylvania. This year's proposed budget is a document of well over $51 billion in state resources. So that is where my work lies, and I'm so excited and grateful to be here with you all today.
Thank you, Representative Harris. That's it's not too shabby of a budget to allocate. And that must keep you really busy. Thank you for all your hard work serving the people of Pennsylvania. And we can say go Birds. It's okay. And this, the Giants are not in there, so we got to go with the next East place. Thank you for that. And I'm also really delighted. We were going to have Mr. Raw Andrews, the executive director of the APA Foundation, and like all of you, he's pulled in 100 different directions. So he delightfully, I would say, and was able to have Dr. Vedrana Hodzic. Sorry, I might not say your last name correct, but I'm going to just say you are a wonderful psychiatrist. You are the medical director of education, I believe, right, for the APA's foundation. So we love the APA Foundation. It's just is a great partner with AFH and just has been a leader. I think in this world of sports psychiatry with the Where We Play platform, sort of across the country, as well as several others where we live, where we work, where we worship, just incredible community work that's been happening through the APA's foundation. So thank you for joining us, and please say hello as well and pronounce your name more correctly than I did. My apologies. It's great to meet
Oh,
you.
thank you very much. Vedrana Hodzic, so pretty close. Very excited to be here. I know it's little bit last minute, but as you said, I lead the education efforts for the foundation. So that includes some fellowship programs for our young psychiatrists and medical students. But I also oversee the schools and justice initiatives. Yeah, so again, happy to be here.
Wonderful, wonderful, awesome. Well, we've got an incredible panel. Let's jump right in. If I can start with Dr. Sweet, I know you've worked with with athletes for decades, right? And oftentimes, as we're talking about these two areas of sort of bridge building and barrier crossing, you've seen all kinds of challenges with athletes, both like individually and community wise. Can you share a little bit about kind of what are some of the challenges that an athlete will come to you and say, I'm having a difficult time with this, and sort of how you address it, how you walk them through it?
Yeah, well, I would say that the majority of the athletes I face, I'd like to start off by saying that they are truly amazing to me because they're such powerful individuals to have arrived at the place that they are. They're already successful. They've already overcome so many challenges. And I find that lots of times in the work that I do in pro sports in particular, many of these athletes, I would say the vast majority of them are well and doing well and are very strong and just like any human will that they'll come up against a bunch of challenges. But I would say though that the challenges they face are sometimes more magnified than the challenges that you and I might face because we're not professional athletes. And in that context, I would like to say that I would performance anxiety would be a huge issue that we would have to look at depression, burnout sometimes happens. Sometimes you have identity struggles,
Mm,
depending on if you're injured or if you're traded or trying to figure your way out on a team. And one that doesn't get talked about a lot is perfectionism.
mm,
The idea that I've got to be perfect. There's so much pressure in sports to do well. So, in the context of most athletes that I see are very well and well adjusted and are doing well, and actually, it's quite admirable to see how they're able to navigate so much pressure that I know I personally wouldn't
mm.
want to have to navigate. But in that context, the idea of performance anxiety, depression, burnout, identity struggles, and perfectionism are the things that I see most commonly, and they're usually exacerbated by things like mental, just a lot of mental pressure that
Mm.
they put on themselves because they're constantly chasing excellence. And you might not think that that's a pressure, but many pro athletes and many elite athletes are very invested in excellence and being well. And that is so when they don't hit that,
Mm.
it's a pressure. Then there's the media scrutiny. You add on top of that media scrutiny, you add on top of that injuries if they come up, or you contract negotiations that
Mm.
sometimes you're dealing with those things, and you'll see that then there's like this perfect storm where a person's ability to function could really be compromised. So those are some of the big areas I would say that I see.
I could totally see that, and especially this week in the in the NBA, the trade deadline, a player wakes up one day, well, now you live in a new city, even though you just bought a home in one place. Now you have to move, or you can have an incredible game, whatever sport you're in, but you drop one pass in the NFL, or you miss one free throw, and the level of scrutiny can be incredible. And there's so many layers, as you're mentioning, and maybe to that segue, Representative Harris, because there's so many layers to wellness, there's so many. I know you talk about the role of community, and Dr. Sweet actually also talks about like this ecosystem of sports, right? How have you sort of approached that topic of what it means to be a community, what it means for us to have, you're not just going to be improving as an individual, whether it's your personal health or whether it's bringing up sort of the rest of the team, if you will. How do you approach community building?
Well, I think one of the things that's important when we talk about mental health and community for me is honesty.
Mm,
Uh, look, I grew up in a black church, and I remember many folks having mental health crises or experiencing stress, anxiety, or what have you from just everyday life. And The moniker will be "Give it to Jesus." And look, I believe in giving it to Jesus, but I also believe in a good therapist too. And for me, I think we as a people have to be honest first,
Mm,
um, with each other around where we are and our own mental health struggles, challenges, therapy, support, so that folks know that it is okay to not be okay.
mm,
For me, as an elected official and with the platform that I have, I am very open and honest about the fact that I have a therapist and
mm,
that I go and I seek help. And particularly for African American males, young African American males, I talk about that because I think it's important that folks know when you are seeking therapy, and that, if they can see themselves in you, then
mm,
they can see themselves in therapy as well. So I think the first step is honesty. I think the other part that we need to build community for me is making sure that we put the tools in place for people to be successful with regards to seeking support. So for me, that's on a government side, that's reimbursement rates,
mm,
that getting more clinicians to be a part of networks. That's funding, whether that's funding for reimbursements, or whether that's funding like in schools. I know in Pennsylvania, we've done a lot of work in putting funding in our school system so that our young people can get therapeutic services. For me, that's building a wellness community
mm.
where now it's not abnormal to seek help, but it becomes the norm. For me, that is important with regards to being and growing a community of wellness and a community of health.
I love that so much, sort of the liberating power of honesty, as well as kind of how you create a system. We were just actually visiting a school earlier this morning in the Bronx. We did a champs visit, part of our Athletes for Hope program, and all of these elementary school kids were being taught both what you can do individually, but also how we can create a system of wellness, exactly to your point there. And it was beautiful. It was also super cute. That was also another part of it. But and to your point there about this sort of bigger system, I'd love to have your thoughts, Dr. Hodges, because I know the APA Foundation has done an incredible job of thinking about how you partner with multiple different entities to be able to build that system of wellness, right? Whether it's bringing on, from the sports end and the clinical end and the funding end. Can you talk a bit about how the APA's foundation approaches program building? What it goes into building a program?
Yes, absolutely. So our goal is really to have programs that benefit individuals and communities. We're the public-facing philanthropic arm of the Maine American Psychiatric Association. So our goal is really to have programs that benefit people across the lifespan and in any sector. So we like to say that we'd like to build a mentally healthy nation for all, where we live, learn, work, worship, and play. And so we have program areas that really match those. And we're really good at bringing people together. We have a good brand name. We have a membership of 39,000 psychiatrists, so we can pull things from kind of across the country and convene. So we do both partnerships with our members, but we also look to other nonprofit organizations and things that are thematically based. So, for example, with Play, we do work with you all with Athletes for Hope. We also have a number of initiatives that are grant-based, so coming from the government. So in our schools program, for example, we have a training called Notice, Talk, Act at school, and that's really to get all school workers, whether that's someone who's a teacher, an administrator, or a bus driver, cafeteria worker, everyone trained on recognizing when a student might have mental health concerns, when they're struggling, how to have those conversations, and then the next steps of how do you get them connected to care. And I think the theme that we're all sort of mentioning, connectedness.
Hmm.
Um, so that's one way that we're doing things really in the programmatic areas. The other thing that the foundation is doing really, we're in year 2 of our strategic plan. And along with that plan, we have essentially PSA campaign, if you will. It's really an informational campaign called Mental Health Care Works. The
Mm.
goal is to get everyone to see mental health as equivalent to physical health so that we can talk about it and address it the same way that we would talk about high blood pressure, diabetes, that people are more comfortable both talking about it and actually taking those steps to get care. So part of the campaign, we feature real life stories, create personas around them to use sort of in the ad messaging that really, it can be, anything from static image to a video snapshot demonstrating some of the common conditions that people deal with. So we have one actually that's with youth, more focused on anxiety. We have depression, postpartum depression, OCD, alcohol use disorder. So we're in our second year of building that out as well. So some more personas to come. And, we have reached, I think we've gone past at least, I think 250, if not 300 million impressions with this.
Really incredible. I mean, I love the campaign myself, and it because it dispels one of the biggest myths that I often get as a psychiatrist. People say, isn't working in mental health sort of depressing? I say, no, mental health care actually works. People get better. That's kind of by and large what we see is that there's hope and people are improving. So thank you for sharing sort of the programmatic perspective of APF, and we're going to dive a bit more into those things as well. Maybe similar in those same, in the same line there of sort of notice, talk, act. Dr. Sweet, I know, when an athlete is sort of thinking about the difference between playing hurt, and playing injured, right? Like having an injury that you say, if I play on this injury, it's physically going to compromise my career, right? Or tearing an Achilles or things of that nature. Emotionally or sort of mental health related wise too, there's a part about, resilience and grit and sort of push through. How do you walk an athlete through when you're thinking about injury, not just kind of physical injury of tearing an ACL or things like that? Because I know you do a lot of education as you're teaching a team and you're saying, hey, this is normal and push through versus, hey, this is something that you got to be careful. Don't push too hard, right? Because if you push too hard, this can result in a place where you could burn out. How do you sort of walk a player through being cautious about burnout, that they're not pushing too hard when the coach is saying, how tired you are, push harder, how much you put in, do more. How do you walk a player through, a danger area, saying, hey, be careful, this is where you might burn out.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I think the main thing is to really first understand the team's culture.
Mm,
So some teams are run like military operations where the ethos of the team is that we push ourselves to the brink
mm,
and we actually get better when we are at the brink and we're so tired, but we can find gas in an empty tank. It's a kind of a philosophy.
mm,
Not everybody agrees with it, but it is a philosophy. It is used, and to be fair, there is success with that. In the current thinking, there's a lot of load management issues, and then people come up with lots of injuries, and burnout is real. What I try to do as a sports psychiatrist is stay in my lane,
mm,
right? So I'm not in the business of telling a player how much they can do or not do on a court or on the field or on the pitch, wherever they are. I try to really work on, well, what does your recovery look like? And by recovery, I mean, are you one, adhering to the recovery strategies that the team has in place for you? Sometimes what's happening is that even if the team is pushing a person or a player, they're not really adhering to the physical recovery
right.
protocol because they themselves have this belief that that these recovery things might be a waste of time or there's something better they could do with their time. So that's the first thing I like to check in on is to be sure that you're actually adhering to the physical recovery, that you're faithful to it, because there's a reason that most elite teams have such great trainers and physical recovery protocols in place. So that's the first thing. The
Mm,
second thing then is to look at what is your sense of what mental recovery is.
mm,
So I spend a lot of time, as you know, Mina, in sleep,
mhm,
looking at your, certain biometrics like around your sleep, your stress markers, right? How are you handling stress? How are you handling sleep? Are you doing anything for rest? Are you doing something outside of basketball, football, soccer, or hockey, whatever it is that is bringing you a sense of being refreshed? and I work on micro recovery.
Mm,
So what happens is that you should have your macro recovery protocol, and I help athletes develop a macro recovery protocol. But then it's really about micro recovery. How do I build something that can get me sort of recentered in 2 to 3 minutes between timeouts or pre-practice, post-practice when I'm not feeling well, and that could be breath work that we could do. It could be a mindfulness exercise that we could do. It's about maybe it's an interoceptive or body awareness techniques that you could use to help yourself micro recover in those moments. But it's a consciousness that you have to have that we try to teach about how important it is to recover, because when you don't recover, tissue repair is delayed.
mm,
Inflammatory markers are rampant. Inflammatory cytokines are running through the body, and as a result, your healing is delayed, and your return to play or your performance is affected. So I talk in those scientific terms so that it's concrete to the athlete, so that they can see that there is a connection to your recovery and even your mental recovery and your physical ability to heal and perform. And then then together we develop a plan that involves macro recovery and micro recovery. And sometimes recovery could look like just sitting and playing the piano
right.
or watching TV or something that's completely different. It doesn't always have to be these fancy things. I mean, there are lots of little things we can do, but I just wanted to sort of create the context for you.
I love that. I love that. That's so powerful. I remember seeing, this, I don't know if it was a documentary or just something that was speaking about when you're first a coach that was walking all American basketball players through, a first practice. And what they really worked on was tying their shoelaces. That was like the first thing. Sometimes fundamentals of micro recovery they all stack up, they all build up, and they contribute to this macro. That's an incredible way, and for an athlete to know that here's the biology of it, here's how this is linked, and this is not something that is, separate. You can really invest in your physical as well as your mental. That's incredible. I love the way that you put that. And maybe similarly, as an individual level, as Dr. Sweet is sort of sharing, Representative Harris, there is sometimes we recover as individuals, but we also recover as a community, right? And you're dealing with sometimes in different places there could be trauma that is a person suffered in their own life, but sometimes we're trying to have these micro and macro recovery moments as a state or as a city or perhaps as a nation. How do you sort of have this trauma lens and the recovery lens when you're looking and saying we're not starting from neutral, right? It's not like there's nothing and then we're just building. Sometimes we're dealing with hurt, or as you alluded to in that prayer this morning, like there are funerals that you just had to attend, right? That involved, these horrific crashes and things like that. So when you have that recovery mindset in mind and the trauma that sort of began the conversation, how do you walk a community through building and recovering in that process?
Well, I think first is acknowledging that communities have trauma and that you can have trauma losing someone that you've never even met.
Mm,
For example, just last week, plane goes down in Northeast Philadelphia and crashes in Northeast Philadelphia. On the plane, there were doctors. There was a young girl who had just received medical care here in the area, and they were going to go back home. Right, plane goes down. All six folks on the plane perish, as well as one person who was sitting in their vehicle. They perish. You have, at that time, 19 people were being treated in our hospitals. You have people who had to leave their homes because of the plane crashing into a residential neighborhood. It hit a mall, but literally into a residential neighborhood, right? So when you look at that, um, on the backdrop of what happened down in the DC area with the military helicopter, and I think it was the American Airlines plane, you just have a community that is experiencing, real physical trauma in the sense that somebody, can't stay in their house tonight because of this explosion. But you also have a larger community experiencing mental trauma and fatigue because
Mhm.
of what you saw happen in the DC area and now what you see happening up the street from you. So I think the first thing for us is we got to recognize that that trauma is real, right? And that, people are really feeling some type of fatigue or being overwhelmed by that. What we've tried to do in Pennsylvania is um, provide, we got a hotline that we have where people can call and get services. We're putting more money into that so that more clinicians can be available for folks when they're feeling overwhelmed and they need to talk to somebody. We also, directly in that neighborhood, our mayor has taken our Department of Behavioral Health, and we've sent people out to go door knocking and to actually talk to folks in the community to talk about what trauma they may be experiencing, what support and what help that they may need. We also work with our clergy when tragedies like this happen to ensure that that they are thinking about what kind of services they could be providing in the community, but also empowering the clergy
Mhm.
with the tools necessary so that they can be kind of a entry point for people. You know, one of the things that we've done differently that I think is tremendous is, you know, giving the imam, giving the priest, giving the rabbi, giving the pastor information that if you have a parishioner who comes to your church and after you pray for them, they still need services, well, here are the people that you can call so that we can get those people into continued services. Think about it this way. I mean, our religious institutions are some of the biggest triage centers we have,
Yes.
right? But if we're not connecting those people of faith and those members of clergy to the services that we have, we're just stopping there. So when we look at the fact that a community can experience trauma, even not being physically or in a relationship with the tragedy, but just all of that being over. Look, I don't care what your political affiliation is, but there's some folks who are experiencing trauma just about what's going on at the federal government level and all of the changes and what's happening fast and what's happening rapidly. We have to see that as trauma as well. And I think when we recognize it as trauma, we then can go in and provide services and make sure people aren't left out there on their own.
Incredibly powerful, Representative Harris. If it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a village entirely for us to be able to recover and grow and really like flourish as a community. I remember one parishioner of a parish told me, I call my religious leader before I call 911. Like that's how much this is a trusted person. This is a person that I go to first before anything. And and I know the APA Foundation has actually done a tremendous job in this. This is one of the, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, Dr. Hodges, about this incredible tool that I've used in training in parishes, this guide for faith leaders, because exactly as Representative Harris is saying, you have this arm of the community that is sometimes underutilized. And sometimes in the psychiatric world, there's been an interesting relationship between the mental health world and the faith community. But tell us a bit about this entire sort of arm of APAF, where we worship, and what was this faith guide? What was the impetus? Because I know part of your role too is sort of the educational work there. So how has that guide been developed, and what's that all about?
Absolutely. So just as Representative Harris was mentioning, the faith leaders actually, are dealing with many individuals who are going through very difficult situations, dealing with a lot of different emotions, and really are kind of one of the frontline workers for mental health that don't get that recognition. And there are times where they need assistance in figuring out when do they actually need to refer to a professional who is kind of trained in mental health. So I think over, I'd say, past 4 or 5 years, it was getting input from a lot of different communities. We were hearing the same types of information, and the APA came together and with some of their councils and committees created the mental health faith guide for faith leaders. It is now in its second version. At the end of last year, we did some updates and came out with it, and it is there as a tool to help faith leaders really understand mental illness a little bit more. They're not there to diagnose, but it is what are kind of signs that tell you maybe we need additional help. So get them more comfortable having some of these conversations that are focused on uh, more kind of a medical model and getting the person referred to treatment. Um, I think in general, we have been trying to do similar things for, if, I guess, a broad term of caregivers, if you will. So, yes, caregivers in the sense of people taking care of their children, their elderly, family members, but also actual care providers in medical settings. So the hospital frontline workers, hence the name Frontline Connect, is one of the programs out of our Center for Workplace Mental Health. So that center actually has numerous resources for health professionals, helping address some burnout issues, but also a similar NTA training as with schools, but for workplaces about being more sensitive to mental health, and really helping people just be more aware of what could be going on in other people's lives that may not come out necessarily kind of in the day-to-day dealings with them. Just keep in mind that you don't really know what's going on at home. You don't know what they're dealing with.
I love that. Yeah, and this is part of the reason I love sort of the profound simplicity of the platforms that are there in APAF. Just puts you in the frame of mind of, where you work or where you play or where you worship. Like these are just you can put yourself at work and think about the Center for Workplace and just like, well, what does it look like in this context, right? That's why I think it really resonates with people to be able to put yourself in those shoes. And I think it's to your point about the impressions, the millions of impressions that have gotten there, it's really moved the needle on the conversation nationally around mental health. And that's something I'd like to get your take on, Dr. Sweet, as well, is, there was a time I remember actually being at a sports game and uh I will confess I am a Knicks fan, lifelong. I've always loved the Knicks. And the opposing team, there was a player who had just spoken about, their mental health openly. And this was a very striking sort of interaction. Some of the fans were trying to heckle the opposing player and say, you're soft, you're talking about your mental health. And then the majority of the fans said, no, 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 no. This is not something, that's not a subject that we make fun of people about. Like, we can make fun of him because he's bad at rebounding. You can make fun of him because he's not a good scorer, but we don't. And I was like, wow, even with the amount of beers that people are consuming, there was still this line of like, no, the narrative around mental health has been shifting partially because of sports. You've been around the leagues for a long time. Can you speak a little bit to how has the conversation, the narrative around mental health been changing in sports and how that has actually impacted the narrative in society as well because of the platform of these athletes that have been open about, their own struggles?
Yeah, it's a great question too. I think it's increasingly getting easier to have the confluence between what's happening in the larger sphere and then what's happening microcosmically in sports. Sports is a wonderful bridge, as you and I have talked in the past. It's a great bridge for us to be able to cross to talk about mental health. And I think you're right. As athletes share their struggles. And when athletes come to me, they ask me, well, I don't want to go out there and say I have a mental illness or anything like that. I tell them it's not even about that. It's much more about you using your platform and the leverage you have to help other people be more comfortable and normalize for them
Mm,
what they're going through because you're bigger than life for than most people because you're in the limelight, you're on stage, and you're in the public sphere. And what happens is that people listen to you, people depend on what you say, and they'll hear it differently when it comes from you. And you don't have to talk about illness or details about your life, is what I often share, is that it could be about a setback that you faced. It could be about an obstacle that you've overcome,
mm,
right? And in addition, maybe some mental performance skills, things that you want to talk about. But the idea is that the minute an athlete says, hey, I have faced this and this is how I've overcome it, or this is what I've struggled with, or this is what this person in my life has struggled with, and I'm supporting them, it really normalizes, it demystifies mental health, it destigmatizes it, and it makes it more accessible for other people to say, all right, maybe I could, too could go and get that. So when you have Kevin Love, for example, talking about, I don't know, depression or panic attacks, that for anybody who's suffering from that, it helped them feel a certain way about it, right? So you're right. The athletes have a great platform, and and I think when they share with vulnerability, when they are vulnerable, and they share some of their vulnerability, and they share how they are getting help, it really helps everybody else when they partner. I mean, athletes often partner with community organizations. It's a big thing in most leagues. They have a cause. When they partner with mental health or
Hmm.
they support a mental health, it could be a local school's mental health program. It could be a nonprofit that does mental health, anything that supports mental health in the community. And an athlete comes by and gives a jersey or signs a baseball or a basketball or something. It's amazing how that again galvanizes the community. And to speak to Representative Harris's point, we are traumatized as a community. This is healing. The athletes, I tell them, you're participating in healing not just individuals, but a community as well.
Wow. That and that gives sort of a broader purpose to the athlete as well. I was speaking with someone from ESPN yesterday for, I know, a little plug for our AFH podcast, and she was saying one of the most meaningful thing for her is not just accomplishments and gold medals and doing great things, but what can you do to affect change in a meaningful way that's going to outlast your trophy, you know? So it's an incredible way to get involved in that healing of the community. As we're doing that work, Representative Harris, at the end of the day, you got the big game. There's your team and there's also an opposing team. There's some opposition. There's going to be some guys who are, tackling you so you don't get that kind of work done. What is not so much opposition politically, party lines, that kind of stuff, but just when it comes to getting meaningful healing work in the community done, what have you found to be some of the most significant challenges, and how have you sort of navigated those challenges to be able to, you know what, let's get this done anyway, but be careful of this. This is a challenge that we've seen.
So I think one of the challenges, and I can't remember which one of my panelists said it, but mental health is not, it's not a nice to have. It's a must have, right? And oftentimes, folks will talk about the physical health, and behavior health and mental health is like is like a side dish. It's not the
Mhm.
main entree.
Right.
It is, it's part of the main entree, if you will. And for me, I think one of the challenges politically is shifting people's mindsets from believing mental health is some type of boutique medicine.
Right.
Uh, it's not, right? So I think that um, more, has been like the first step,
Mm.
um, getting folks understanding that this is not a nice to have, this is a must have. I think additionally, um, it is getting folks to understand that it's not just a niche market of people that we're talking about. I think a lot of times when you talk about behavior health services and mental health services, we think about our brothers and sisters, our siblings who are who may have been institutionalized for mental health services. But that's always where our mind goes a lot of times in the space, and that's not the case. We
Mm.
talk about your mom, we talk about your sister, we talk about your auntie, we're talking about these are all folks who are also getting mental health services, who are seeing a therapist, who are talking to a counselor, right? They are all a part of this kind of mental health wellness, or health wellness. When we think about it from that lens, it helps us remove some of the political barriers,
Mm.
because look, we don't have a infinite amount of resources in government. So when you start to prioritize and look at what is necessary for a thriving community or a thriving society, when you talk about healthcare, this has to be embedded in that conversation and not just something on the side. So we've been doing that. I will say, while there were many negatives to COVID-19, if I was to pick out one of the positives, I would say that, at least for me, from what I've seen in the political space, more and more people post COVID are starting to understand why mental health treatment, therapy, services is extremely important,
Mm,
right? We did a lot of telehealth medicine, and a lot of states begin to legalize or allow practitioners to do telehealth medicine during COVID-19. That is still in place in many places across the country, which have increased our ability to provide services to folks. We've definitely done more in the school-based space, where we're providing more resources to get our young people. And when I say school-based, I mean like actually physically in schools. We're doing more around that. I think all of those things have helped us change how we see mental health, not as a nice to have, but a part of the whole healthcare spectrum.
absolutely incredible. There's always a phrase I hear a lot, and I think we repeat in the mental health world, is that there is no health without mental health, right? That this is just, it is part of the same framing. You can't have I'm entirely healthy, but my brain is not well now. I can't, I can't function well. And to your point, there is this, it takes a lot of work to shift narrative, shift culture. There's an educational campaign sort of in the community that it takes to do that. And I'm curious, Dr. Hodzic, because I'm somebody that's invested in the education system as well. I spend time in Colombia walking fellows through how we want to understand and view the healthcare system. And I know the APA Foundation has done a tremendous job of teaching residents and kind of walking them through sort of an educational, broader viewpoint of how do we see the community? How do we get involved in leadership? Can you speak a bit more to how you're taking this educational lens? I know this is close to your heart, sort of in your particular role. Um, but as we're working on the one hand to shift the narrative in the community, how have you been looking at shifting the narrative and educating the next generation of psychiatrists?
So, as I mentioned, I run the fellowship program. So, these programs have been around for over 50 years. There are currently 9 different ones. Obviously, 50 years ago, it was about two programs. Now we've really grown. But in the past 5 years, we've actually doubled the number of fellows. So, we're at about 200 now, 205 exactly. Our goal is to maintain the 200 for now. So, these are psychiatry residents. So, they've gotten their MD degrees, but are still training in psychiatry, and they can be at any level within the residency training to qualify. We really recruit them in different areas, but they may have certain educational requirements within each fellowship, but there are overarching things that we do for them. For example, a professional development series or events at annual meeting. So the goal is to really infuse a lot of what we're doing within foundation to make sure that they're aware of concerns within the community. If foundation is doing an event that's local to them, we invite them there so they can actually see firsthand. Or for example, one of the fellowships is called the Community Diversity Fellowship. And for that one, we actually require them to do 15 volunteer hours per month in a community health center that is outside of their regular training program, just to get a different perspective on things. So we have that kind of core component there. All of the fellows, we open all our trainings to, whether that's the Notice Talk Act at school, the centers, the faiths. We get anyone who's interested in those to actually participate. And this year, well, in 2024, about a year ago, we actually launched a new program called the Foundation Ambassadors Program. And there we have actually opened up access to annual meeting for our medical students. So people early on in the pipeline, to get them to see what psychiatry is really about, to learn more about foundation, and have some events for them at annual meetings. So we're really trying to get them on board with what foundation is doing and think about things in kind of the larger perspective, but also what they're doing in their own communities. We had I believe, so part of the program, so the July group, who will be going to our annual meeting this coming May, we had 600 of them, and they did 700 presentations on behalf of the foundation, and they had to submit reports to us, and they've gone kind of to a lot of different areas, so not just their own schools, but community, health events, and the audience collectively that they reached was over 9,000 individuals. So they've been able to kind of really be ambassadors for the foundation for us.
I love that. And I love that it's on, so many different levels, both like the fellow, resident, and there, shout out to some medical students who are with us here today, as well as some residents. So you're seeing how this is really impacting, the next generation in a very powerful way. So I'm grateful for the work that you're doing there. And as I could be asking you guys questions all day. I know you've got a ton of other things to do. So as we come to a close of our time here, I wanted to just give each of you a moment to share a sort of a closing thought. Just if there's one thing that you'd want somebody to walk away, maybe starting with you, Dr. Sweet. Just if there's one thing that you want someone to know about the sports psychiatry world, that's sort of the first half of the question. The second is, how can they connect with you? How can they learn more? How can they follow you? Where can they get more information?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing I'd like them to know is that with the sports psychiatry world, it's an emerging field. It's a very powerful field. We're still growing. And even though I've been in it for 15 years, it's still young and it's still growing. And I think that it offers a wonderful combination of things. We can look at neurological things, medical, psychological, environmental, interactional. And I think it's wonderful when we can come together, have conversations like this. Like, for example, we just discussed trauma on the community level here, as well as at the individual level and at the educational level. And I think that that's, to me, very rewarding because increasingly, we have to understand that we're in an ecosystem and none of us can exist individually. So I think the takeaway here would be that there is a place for the integration of sports psychiatry into sports culture and in society in general. And I am right now in my podcast phase. I have a podcast that's a play on my last name, which is Sweet. It's called The Sweet Spot, where I integrate science and soul and lots of different interesting things. It's really my way of just trying to contribute back to the community, and it's been a lot of fun. So you can connect with me on LinkedIn or YouTube or Instagram or X. I'm on all of those platforms. If you want to just send me a message, I'm happy to interact.
And you got to check out the sweet spot. That's always a highlight of my
We
day.
have
Just
a lot of fun.
yeah, it's bite size. It's like really science based, but also fun. It's just an incredible resource. Thank you for taking the time to do that for the community. Appreciate you,
My pleasure.
Representative Harris.
I think I would my departing words would be that your story is a story, and I think
Mhm.
that like Dr. Sweet said, when those athletes share that they're in therapy or that they're seeking treatment, it really changes the narrative. So I tell people all the time, I'm Jordan Harris. I'm a member of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives, and I go to therapy,
Mm,
and there is
Wow.
absolutely nothing wrong with it. And it has made me a better person, and it has helped me um, um, with my health journey. So
Hmm.
um, I think we must, particularly as professionals, we must share our stories and encourage more people to do the same. I think that's how we build this community that we talk about. Is that we have to be, first partakers in
mm,
sharing who we are. Far too many people look at us and see our success and think that we got there from being perfect. It's
mm.
Hmm.
the failures and us overcoming the failures that really help people along the way. So, folks want to reach out to me, repjordanharris.com online. I'm Jordan A. Harris on Instagram, Rep Jordan Harris on TikTok, Rep Harris on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it today. Um, but that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Thanks for having me.
It's a wonderful story. And on TikTok too. That's you got to reach the youth. I love it, man.
Wow.
Thank you, Representative Harris. Appreciate that. Dr. Hodzic.
So I think the two things that I would point out are the foundation really is trying to change the narrative and make this about mental wellness, not mental illness.
Mm.
The campaign that we have, Nowhere Do We Mention Stigma, it's really anyone that needs treatment. You don't have to have a lifelong mental illness. Even if you're suffering in one moment, we want to be there to provide help. The other thing, just listening to the other panelists that I was thinking about is balance. So with the athletes, it is a lot of really physical things that they're doing, and it's thinking about what are other activities in their life that they can do. Versus a lot of other patients that we may be treating, it's sort of they may have desk jobs and things, and we're thinking about the opposite of how do we get them doing more physical things. So it's really thinking about balance in your life. And if people can go to apaf.org, that would be the best place to go to learn about all of our programs. And then in the chat, I can put my email for direct contact.
Sure, that would be great. And we have a comment just of appreciation. Dr. Yusra, we were just emailing this morning, and she's very grateful for this conversation. And I gotta say, sometimes you get on a panel and you learn a lot, but sometimes you get on a panel and you are sort of moved and like you feel like your soul is being filled by the presence of the panelists. And this is one of those times where I'm honored to be sort of in your presence, just like the work that you all have done over the years, the impact in the community, just like your personal example is something I'm grateful for, and I know our patients are grateful for it, and our communities are as well. So I really want to thank you, Dr. Sweet, for taking the time to be here, Representative Harris, Dr. Hodzic. Like this is incredibly impactful, and we're really really grateful for you. So thank you for that.
Thank you for making it happen, me, Dr. Horn.
Pleasure. It is a pleasure. And we'll keep the combo going. And thank you for all those who tuned in and for tuning in with us this Athlete Mental Health Week. There is a wonderful suicide prevention talk happening this evening that will be live streamed on Helinski's Hope Instagram, because that's part of our focus of the week is making sure that we can do everything we can in the community to prevent suicide as well as combat stress, trauma, and all the other topics that we mentioned. So, and as we've said, continue to tune in, and there'll be resources that we're going to be emailing out at the end of the week. And enjoy Super Bowl. Hopefully your team wins. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.